but somehow people still come in with these ridiculous expectations that Avanesyan is just going to get walked through without like any pushback on Boots' behalf. When we just saw that with Crawford, Crawford was getting touched and Boots got touched. It shouldn't be that much of a surprise. That's what I'm saying. So put some respect on the opponent sometimes. That's a lesson. Let's talk science and break down the flow of this fight and kind of talk about why things played out the way they did. Hit that like button, subscribe, and then at the end, we're going to talk about the comparisons to Crawford, because I know a lot of people are talking about that. So stick around. Now let's get into it. In order to properly understand and break down this fight, there are some underlying psychological elements that have to be acknowledged. For one, Boots is coming into this with the mindset of destruction. He wants to put on a more destructive performance that supersedes Crawford's. And early on, you could tell he's trying to smell blood at any point, because he lands a jab that knocks Avanesyan off balance, and you see Boots turn up immediately, takes big swings. He's trying to put on a monstrous, destructive, like KO performance. Now, what's interesting is once he realizes that Avanesyan is not hurt, he pulls back and he starts boxing from the outside. He is still advancing a little bit, but he's purposely staying on the outside, working behind his jab. And now in this type of fight, he's way safer, taking way less shots and far more in control of the fight. But he's also not doing as much damage, which is a desire. He wants to do a lot of damage. So there's kind of a conflict of interest there. Now you can see in points in this fight where he bounces between wanting to box and wanting to brutalize and beat down. You could tell with his body language and his intentions. You see him walking forward way more aggressively, closing the distance, which he doesn't have to do because he can fight on the outside. He's the bigger, faster, more skilled fighter. He can do that. But he's choosing to walk Avanesyan down and work more in the tight mid-range and on the inside, landing body shots, hard hooks and uppercuts, but also in the process, of course, if he engages in that type of fight, well, he's fighting an inside fighter. He's fighting Avanesyan in his realm. So of course he's going to get touched more. Now, the type of damage Boots is going to be capable of delivering consistently when he's coming forward, working behind power shots like these, power punches, hooks around the guard, uppercuts, body shots, just brutal full power shots. He's sitting down on everything. That type of damage he's going to be able to deliver, and fighting like this is going to be way different than how it would be if he was boxing, like how we saw earlier, working behind the jab and going backwards instead of forwards. But the problem is, if he's engaging in that type of fight, he's focusing on offense. So of course, Avanesyan is going to be able to get more of his shots in and intercept with counters in the process, especially because Avanesyan has underrated technique and kind of explosivity. He's sneaky with his shots. That's something that I said a year ago with Crawford when I broke down Avanesyan versus Crawford, and his technique being a little bit sneaky because he doesn't have too much telegraph. So his shots just sneak through, especially in the middle of you throwing your own shots. But here's the key thing. Despite that, Boots isn't really threatened. He's getting touched, but he doesn't care. He still wants to fight and engage in this type of fight, even though he doesn't have to. Now, Boots said his timing was off. Did that play one of the primary factors of why he was getting touched up so much? I wouldn't say so. I'd say the primary factor is just Avanesyan being himself, and the way he throws punches, and the secondary factor is Boots fighting on the inside in Avanesyan's territory, in Avanesyan's wheelhouse, fighting in the perfect range where Avanesyan can just shoot out those quick shots and Boots can't react in time. But like we said, despite these shots landing, Boots still desires to fight in these kinds of exchanges. You see how he's still sitting there on the inside waiting for shots, trying to counter in between. Well, not in that instance. He wasn't trying to counter. He was really defending himself, but he could back up. He doesn't disengage. Boots at this point is answering back more and more in these types of exchanges. He lets Avanesyan throw, and whether or not it lands, which is important, he's answering back. So that's one good thing about Boots, is he's the type of fighter, even if he doesn't get hit, he's going to follow through with the counters. But he's building his offensive timing, and in order for him to build it in this type of way, he has to be in this type of fight. Now, at the end of that second round, there's evidence that he's starting to find his offensive timing, trying to catch Avanesyan in between shots as he's throwing shots. And you see, boom, these shots are getting closer, the timing is getting better. It's just now the placement is what he has to adjust. Boots right now is throwing more of a probing jab to start this third round, And you can tell it's a probing jab with the intent of bringing out a reaction, because as soon as Boots feints out that lead hand and Avanesyan feints back, Boots pulls back. So he's expecting Avanesyan to respond. And look at where he jabs. He doesn't jab at Avanesyan's face. He jabs at that right hand to bring out a response from that right hand. And you can tell he expects that response because he gets outside of it to land the left to the body. And the left to the body was meant to come underneath the right hand that could possibly come out. Now Avanesyan is leaning in, using his head and his guard to position himself in the inside fight. So Boots pulls back. He pulls back his own guard and he lets Avanesyan fall forward and down, while at the same time he has that other glove kind of framing on the guard to hold it in place so he can land that uppercut. That's a really slick move, using his own momentum against him right there. So let's build off what we've been establishing. Boots knows that Avanesyan is a responsive fighter. That's why earlier he purposefully used his left hand to jab at the right glove of Avanesyan to bring out a right-handed response. And so he throws that left uppercut to the body. Avanesyan responds like how he's prone to doing. But Boots expects that. And the other thing is, Boots has been getting touched a lot, but despite being touched, even when he gets touched, he's countering, despite whether or not the shot lands, or regardless of if the shot lands. The shot lands, but he expects the shot to come anyway, so he counters over top. Now just at the end, we get to see some of that destruction that we've been talking about. Boots is trying to annihilate him. He's trying to get him out of here. A little bit of a well, you could say a frame or a feint to hold the guard like that. Uppercut up the middle, and then a slight little peel to open up the side of the guard for the hook. And yeah, he's just opening up a can. This is the problem. People don't know how to properly give credit to fighters because they don't respect the opponents that they're facing. Mostly, for the most part, because they don't know who they are. They're not aware of who they are. It doesn't take that much of an eye test or too much thinking to put things together. So that's what we're about to do right now. David Avanesyan was a good fighter before he fought Crawford, and when he fought Crawford, and he was a good fighter when he fought Boots. I'm not calling him an amazing fighter or saying he's one of the best. I'm just saying he's a decent fighter. He's a good fighter. When Crawford fought him, people said he was a cherry pick because they didn't know who he was. And Crawford mostly dominated that fight, just like how Boots mostly dominated this fight. But Crawford got touched up way more than people expected. And I remember around that time, people were talking about, well, if Avanesyan was touching him up that much, then Spence, so on and so forth, right? And that's the same thing people are saying with Crawford versus Boots. They're like, well, if Avanesyan was touching Boots up that much, then Crawford. It's completely different styles of fights. They both approach that fight in a way that would get them touched up, and that's why they got touched up. And on top of that, Avanesyan, with his technique, is a little bit tricky to deal with. But that right there should have given people a good idea of what was happening when Crawford fought Avanesyan. Oh, this dude is pretty good. That's what people should think, at least when it comes to offense, landing. But somehow people still come in with these ridiculous expectations that Avanesyan is just going to get walked through without like any pushback on Boots' behalf, when we just saw that with Crawford, Crawford was getting touched and Boots got touched. It shouldn't be that much of a surprise. That's what I'm saying. The problem is the public has unrealistic expectations. Boots mostly dominated that fight as well, with a pretty dominant beatdown. He just got touched up more than we expected. But before you can even compare performances with a like opponent, you have to recognize the level of that opponent and what he's going to bring to the table. And people didn't put enough respect on Avanesyan's offense and his lack of telegraph and his surprising techniques. So they are surprised and somewhat maybe somewhat disappointed when they see Boots getting touched up. But like we said earlier, they felt the same way about Crawford. But that's just what happens when you face Avanesyan. The commonality there is Avanesyan. So put some respect on the opponent sometimes. That's a lesson. Put some respect on the opponent sometimes. And then the surprise goes away. But get down in the comment section. Tell me your thoughts. That is all. I'm out.